Hey there. Welcome to episode 18 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. My name is Ryan Robillard, PGA of Canada golf coach, and on this week's episode, I interview caddy Mark Malatz. Now, Mark's not just your average caddy. Mark is a caddy at one of the top 5 public golf courses in the U.S. and the number 1 golf course in Wisconsin. That's all I'm going to tell you about what course it is. We'll see if you can do a little bit of research and find out which course it is. Mark is a fantastic follow on Twitter. I'll post a link in the description down below. And he has recently released his book called Caddy Tales, which I'll also put a link in the description down below. His book is fantastic. He was fortunate to send me an advanced copy, or I was fortunate that he sent me an advanced copy. And during the interview, we spent a little bit of time talking about his book, but we also dove into how he got into caddying, what he learned very early on that he needed to do to be a really good caddy. We talked about how he helps players manage some first tee jitters and expectations. And I think that was a really cool part of the conversation that I think can relate to all golfers of all levels. And he sees it day in and day out. And that was some really valuable info that we got in that part of the conversation. We also had some laughs as well, talking about a couple of the experiences that he's seen and a little bit of things that come out of his book. We talk about the halfway house and the snack bar at his golf course. It's very highly touted, and we talk about some of his favorite things on that menu. And then towards the end, we have some rapid fire questions and get to know him a little bit better. I really enjoyed this interview. I really enjoyed this book. I think that you're going to find a lot of value in this interview as well. If you do, please let me know. But that's all for now. This is a little bit longer episode. I didn't chop it into 2 parts, so it's about a 50-minute interview, but I want it to all be in one. So let's jump right in and enjoy this interview, episode number 18, my interview with caddy Mark Malatz. Welcome to the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. Thanks all for taking some time and coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So just curious, so where are you located at? What part of the world are you in?
Yeah, I'm here in beautiful southeast Wisconsin.
Okay. Probably not the most beautiful at the end of October, maybe a little bit more beautiful in July and August.
Yeah, great fall colors, but
Yeah.
we're starting the cool off process now.
Yeah, I would assume so. All right, Mark. So you are you're a caddy, and by definition, I think you have one of the coolest jobs in the world. I've had the chance to caddy for some of my students. I've also had a chance to caddy in a professional event, and I've really enjoyed the interaction I've been able to have with players. And I just want to have you on just to kind of learn a little bit more from someone who has literally caddied for hundreds or probably thousands of rounds. And I think it'd be cool just to give some of the listeners a little bit of a backdrop on what that caddy experience is like. Some of them maybe have played golf and had a caddy, but I'm assuming most of them probably haven't been a caddy. So I have to start. How did you get into caddying? How did your path lead you to become a caddy?
Yeah, I fell into it by accident, maybe you would call it desperation. My background is that for many years I was actually a pastor. During that time period, over 15 years, I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression, and made the mistake of isolating myself. And one bad decision led to another, and just a lot of inner turmoil, a lot of pain that just poured out of myself, and ended up making some bad decisions that hurt myself and hurt my family and hurt others, and ultimately led to me resigning from that at the end of 2018, which was a very, very scary time, and one that I don't wish to relive, but it began the process of healing and going in another direction in life. And I didn't know what that was going to be. And so a lot of doors had closed. And then obviously now one opened, and that was to be a caddy. Decided to move from Michigan to where my wife is from here in Wisconsin. And she actually grew up a mile and a half from this beautiful golf course that we heard had a caddy program. And we were at Christmas 2018, shortly after I had resigned, and while we were still making the decision on whether we were going to move. And my brother-in-law said, "Hey, I hear the caddies do really well." And so that led to me looking it up online and throwing out an application. One thing led to another, and in May of 2019, I began the journey. And it was one of kind of baptism by fire. Got trained and stuff, but ultimately you're not fully prepared for the physical grind, and then also you learn on the job how to be a better caddy. And so it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me, one that I'm blessed to have, and one that I've grown into, that has become more of a significant passion in my life, and one that I hope will open some other doors and opportunities as I move forward.
Nice. That's I was actually curious how you ended up in Wisconsin, but I guess you answered that with your wife living there. Or well, your wife being there originally. So finishing your fourth season, roughly how many rounds have you caddied for?
Right. So this year we had, I'll give kind of a estimate because we
Sure.
have a few weeks left in this season. It's my fifth season, and I'm going to end up doing right around 150 rounds, and that's on the low end because we had a fuller staff this year than we
Okay.
had the last couple of years. And so I would say, you probably over 700 rounds,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
you're talking over, 1,000 bags. And so it was really busy the previous 2 years. And this year I actually had some more days off. I'm talking to you on a day off. Those were harder to come by the last couple of years.
Right.
And this year didn't do quite as many double loops, 2 loops in a day.
Yeah.
But it's been really good. The body only has so much. I still
Sure.
feel plenty of pain even after 150 loops this year.
Well, especially at the property that you're at, being one of the best clubs in the U.S. and quite frankly, probably one of the best resorts in the world. But also knowing that golf course and knowing the terrain, that's probably got to be a challenging walk at times.
Yeah, and you're carrying 2 bags, and like a day like tomorrow, they're projecting we're going to get maybe upwards of an inch of rain, so it's going to be a steady rain all day. And
Right.
I'm sure some groups will cancel, but most of our players come from out of state, so many will play because that's when they're here. And those bags become awfully, awfully heavy. And
Yeah. Well, they don't get
so
lighter with rain.
yeah, and they've got every single possible thing packed into it. So
Right.
it's a grind. And yeah, some days are more of a grind than others, depending on the bag you're carrying, but also then the quality of the player.
Right, for sure. You mentioned the training to become a caddy, and I'm assuming that there was some training that had to be done. Can you kind of what is training to become a caddy actually look like?
Yeah, so we had written tests, we had some videos and manuals we had to read, but really what you do is I came out before May of that year, spent a number of days, and you go around with veteran caddies, and they're a few extras, and they're hitting the ball, and you're with all the other guys who are training, and you're going through 9 holes at a time with them hitting, and the trainers really guiding you, and constantly asking the same questions so that they become kind of second nature and reminding us of things. And so you do that for a number of days. And after each one, they're sitting you down and going through an evaluation that was pretty thorough, letting you know what you did well, what things you might want to work on, and then ultimately you pass. And then when you start, they try to put you with like a single bag and with a veteran caddy for your first few rounds so that it's a little more comfortable for you.
You mentioned some of those things that they want to become like kind of second nature. I'm assuming there was some things early on that they were really trying to hammer home.
Yeah.
What was maybe those first couple of things that caught you off guard? Like, oh, I have to become an expert at X very
Yeah.
early on if I want to be any good at this.
Yeah, well, really, one of them, which will sound simple, is knowing how to move, so that you're out and moving quickly from one spot to another. So having the bags on your shoulder right before the last person is going to tee off, and then not really watching golf, so to speak, but immediately upon it being hit, taking off to the next shot. Because when you have 4 players who aren't professional caliber players, um, the rounds aren't meant to be at the pace that you see on television. And occasionally that's tough for players to understand, but we're hitting more shots. We're not hitting them as straight. We've got caddies with 2 bags, not one, all that. And so the caddy kind of getting out and setting the pace is a very, very important thing. Otherwise, you'd have 6, 7 hour rounds out there some days. So that's one that I felt was really, really hammered in, and it takes some time to get good at it because you have to anticipate certain things, or you have to be comfortable, uh, moving. But physically, you also have to be ready for it. One of the things that we didn't spend a ton of time on in training, because this is more of you just have to learn it, is, and this is something that players really, really find important, is reading the greens. Not that we didn't spend time on it,
Right.
but it is something that really comes much better over experience. And so I do think about like the first year versus now, how quite frankly how bad I had to be, and how uncomfortable that was at times, compared to how it is now.
Yeah, I think in the little bit of experience that I've had caddying, again, just with obviously one player, but also in the opportunities that I've had going to facilities and having caddies or having 4 caddies, the thing I guess I didn't really realize early on is it's that caddy's responsibility to like effectively manage that group for the day. It's a lot more than just watching that player's golf shot and saying, "Hey, good shot, let me wipe your club down." You're shepherding that group around, and you're also trying to ensure that the groups behind you are not or they're not having to wait in different things like that. Like and I'm sure you probably believe this as well. When you have golfers that are out there with a caddy, that caddy is essentially the live or die of that player's experience. If
Yeah,
they have a
yeah,
really good caddy experience, like they're out there, they're having a fantastic time because you're out there with them for 4 or 5 hours. I've had caddies that I'm not sure if I've caught them on an off day, or maybe they just the way that they were, maybe a little bit standoffish, but I kind of left there sometimes with a bad taste in my
yeah.
mouth because of that experience. And I've had some rock stars that even if I played poorly or the weather wasn't perfect,
Yeah.
I'll still talk about my caddy experience I had at that club.
Right. No, that is something that was really emphasized to us when we started. Is we're part of a world class organization and a major hospitality group, but the people they spend the most time with, the guests, are the caddies. And so certainly, and I talk about this in the book that I wrote, Caddy Tales. Certainly the golf knowledge is important, but there's a percentage of players, probably a higher percentage of players than people realize, for whom the golf knowledge that we have isn't as helpful as one might think. I mean,
Yeah.
meaning, and I don't even mean that to be disparaging, but it's probably the hardest
It's
thing
just
is when you have
honest.
yeah, probably the hardest thing is when you have a player who's a high handicap player who thinks that because they have a caddy, they're going to come and shoot under par. Those are the
Yeah.
rounds that I find difficult. That's not how it works.
Right.
You really help them navigate where to go and avoid trouble and maybe not do worse. But it's not like somebody suddenly is draining 60-foot putts all the time. And occasionally you have a player who thinks that's how it's going to go.
Right.
And the players that I think have the best time are ones who come with realistic expectations and then have a caddy who is really there to guide them to do the best of their abilities, but also is really engaging, keeping the group moving, helping them to know valuable things, for instance, about the course or maybe the history of it or whatever. Yeah, and so it is more than golf knowledge. It really is. You got to be able to talk with people. I talk about how that's a skill generally for like the younger caddies to learn. That they're not always as naturally comfortable with it, and it's a skill that they grow into. It happened to be one that I think is probably one of my strengths, is being able to get along with the players. And early on, that probably covered that I wasn't as good as some of the other caddies
Yeah.
at the golf stuff. And I knew that you have to get better, you have to grow and learn and all of that stuff, and I certainly have. But a lot of days, the more important thing is like making players feel comfortable, because there are some who are very, very, very uncomfortable when they come because they don't want to embarrass themselves, and
Yeah.
so I try to put them at ease. Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually thumbed through your book. Thanks for sending me a copy in advance. And we'll come back. We'll definitely talk about, because there's a couple of things I pulled out there. One of the things I want to talk about, which you kind of referenced, what's like your go-to story or question, or what do you do to essentially kind of maybe calm people down? Because I'm assuming the environment is like they get to the first tee, they're now hitting balls in front of people they don't know. They've obviously probably
Yeah.
spent a great deal of money to get there. Like their expectations are so high. They hope the weather's perfect. Like, what's your go-to when you know that you have that 25 handicap that's like shaking
Yeah.
it in their boots? They can really put the ball on the tee. What's your go-to kind of strategy to calm them down?
Right. Yeah. So, you'll have two different, this is a gross generalization, but you have two different kinds of player that you meet. You have the player who's really scared, the one you just asked about. And one of the things that I and other caddies will tell them is, sir, ma'am, trust me, we've seen every kind of golf possible out here, and you are not going to be the worst. And also tell people, and I just shared this on another podcast recently, and I think I speak for a lot of caddies when I say this, that I'll tell people, hey, on the list of things that caddies care about, your quality of player, your score, it doesn't crack the top 5 on the list.
Yeah.
And so you'll let
Well
them know,
said.
hey, let's keep things moving. Let's have a fun day. Enjoy the beauty of the course, whatever. And that generally tends to help. Uh, on the flip side, it's a little more challenging when you have players who are coming with, you can just tell, unrealistic expectations. Like a guy who will say, just as long as I break 80, I'll be happy. As though like 80 would be 81 would be this grand disappointment. And you're like,
Right.
this isn't the same as your course back home, and it may not be the place you have your best round. It might be, but it may not be. And we don't want to set the day up to fail. Or a lot of times guys are choosing to play one tee box back further probably than they
Yeah.
would. And so what you're trying to do a lot of times is temper expectations, or help people to realize and prepare for that this is maybe a little more difficult challenge than a lot of the ones you have. And that's a lot more difficult to do because you're generally talking to someone who's very strong minded. You're talking to someone who, sorry, I don't know if that popped up, but I was getting a call. You're talking to someone who is very generally used to being in charge. We have a lot of bosses, those types of people.
Right.
And so you have to be more delicate with that. And but yeah, those are kind of the discussions you have.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. If you are, I have a favor to ask. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and make sure you hit that bell to make sure you get notified on when a new episode drops. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure you subscribe there as well. But if you could leave me a rating, wherever you're listening or watching, if you do those things for me, it really helps the podcast grow and also motivates me to put out more content. And as always, on any platform, if you ever have any questions, please reach out. Let me know. I answered every comment. Now let's get you back to your episode. Yeah, we'll hop into something because I think it'll tie in nicely what we're talking about here, about that expectation. And if you have your best round or you don't have your best round, I'm assuming you've seen many of rounds that have just been explosions where players have shot a million, for lack of a better term. And I think that kind of goes into that. They're nervous. And I think, like you said, they expect to travel to a course, which realistically, I'm assuming the course that you're at, slope and rating is probably a lot higher than where a lot of these people are coming from. But I do want to talk about, you said that you don't want the score to ruin the experience. You told a fantastic story in your book about a player who made 8 birdies and was standing on the 14th or the 15th hole and had that explosion and completely destroyed that player's experience. You mind kind of revisiting that story for us?
Yeah, and it's a one that's common amongst people, is that this person happened to be doing great, and they had a hard time seeing that after a rough hole. But for a lot of people, they can't see the good in their quest for the great, and so they're kind of angry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wonder, do you even enjoy this, or do you like golf? in that particular case, I just saw how, when faced with adversity, the reason I told that story, this person couldn't recover, and it just soured the whole day, not only for them, but for the people around them. And I find, the reason why I am sensitive to that or tell that is not to just pick on people or to be critical. It's because I can relate so much to it, because that's how I was in my old life. That
Right.
I was always seeking something that was unattainable. And so I had a hard time celebrating the wins along the way. And I also had people, outside of me who were constantly, critical or pushing for something more. And I allowed those voices to kind of drown out the other more positive voices, because there were those too. And it stole my soul. And it also led to me seeking approval and to feel good in ways that ultimately weren't healthy and that were just flat out wrong in many instances. It wasn't because I was just like looking for a way to destroy my life, or wasn't looking for a way to make wrong decisions or to hurt others. It's, those aren't conscious things you're thinking of. What you're doing is you're feeling bad, and so you're filling the void. Well, some people do it by going and drinking too much. Some people do it by overspending. Some people do it by any, number of things, whether, any number of addictions. In this case, and on the golf course, the way I often see that poured out is through tantrums.
Yeah.
And you can just see the unhealthiness in it. And I find it to be, one of those ways, and this is why I was motivated to write a book. And this is one of those reasons also why I see why caddying has been more meaningful to me than just carrying bags, is that golf mirrors life in so many ways. And I see the reactions that people have, or their approaches to it, generally coincide with the health that they have off the golf course as well.
You say that so spot on, and we're at the very tail end of competitive season here for my players, and I'm just thinking back, or I'm thinking about my players and how they act on the golf course, and a lot of it coincides, I think, a lot with how they act when they face adversity in normal life. The person that's a snap show on the golf course has a very short temper in real life as well. The person that speaks negatively and head down and mopes, they're the exact same way in real life. And I think also the person that I often think, and I have a couple as well, the person that when they face adversity, they're kind of like, hey, it's okay. Let's just go find it and hit it again, is like the same person in the workforce. It's like, hey, you know what? We made a mistake or something's going
Yeah.
wrong. Let's just figure it out and keep going. And I think something you said, that question you had in your mind about, do you even like playing golf? It's amazing how often sometimes I look at my players or golfers out there and I literally ask myself that question, like, are they even enjoying being out here?
Yeah.
And what the way golf is runs so much in parallel to the way that our lives are, right? We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. The thing that I tell a lot, or that I tell all of my players, is we're going to hit bad shots. We might as well just kind of understand that's going to happen, but that's totally okay. We're not going to have that perfect round. Yes, you are a very skilled player, but that doesn't mean you're immune to hitting a shank, or to miss a 1 foot putt, or whatever it is. Those things are going to happen. And I think a couple, the thread that, or the theme that I kind of pulled out of your book, and I think you said earlier as well, you're not telling these stories to point out people's negatives, but essentially trying to pull out and say, like, everything that happens on the golf course is going to be okay. The best experience, the worst experience, all these things are going to be fine.
Right. And I think too, like, uh relating to what you just said, there's a difference between having high goals, which a lot of these people want. Of course, that's how they become successful in life. That's how they can afford to come to a place like I work at. There's a difference between having high goals and having realistic expectations. And
Please go
uh
on.
and I think that, well, and I think that because when for instance you're trying to help people know there's going to be realistic expectations, you're not suggesting to them they shouldn't have high goals. for instance, the person who says, I just want to break 80, great, set that goal. But have a realistic expectation that sometimes on the golf course, things just happen, or you're not always going to score what you want. And things are going to not always go your way, or sometimes the conditions are just bad. I mean, you'll have days out where I'm at where it's raining and there's 40-mile-an-hour wind and people don't move up, for instance, on a tee box.
Right.
You know, it's like you have to learn how to adjust because the conditions call for it. And that's not a sign of defeat or weakness. It's a sign of wisdom, one that I too often didn't exhibit in my own life. And so what happened for me in my previous life is that I oftentimes had high goals, and it allowed me to be successful a lot of the time. There on the outside, there was a lot of great things, a lot of good success. But my expectations were I was never going to fail, or my expectation, arbitrary expectation I had was I was never going to be criticized, or I was never going to fall short, or another place was never going to be better. And those were all expectations that were so faulty that they set me up for misery, and then they led to dumb decisions. And so I am really sensitive to that. The problem wasn't having high goals. The problem was having poor expectations and not adjusting and responding to issues as they arise in a healthy manner. And so I can take so much of that past and translate it to the golf course, and see that, you know, we want to strive for a healthier way to deal with the things that we're going through.
Yeah, I
And
think.
I'm not there yet. I still have
Yeah.
setbacks. You know, it might be good 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time I fall into old patterns. And it's, you know, I had the faulty expectation after I transitioned to moving here, and after I got through all the chaos of my life, that I had, all the carnage that I had, was that everything was going to be an upward ascent. Well, it's not.
Right.
There are some major setbacks and difficulties and roadblocks along the way. And so you've got to navigate those, just as there are open doors and wonderful opportunities, such as, you know, this week I'm getting to talk to cool podcasters and releasing a book. You know, that's great. But I'm trying to be healthy and not set the expectation like, oh, I finally arrived and now everything's going to be wonderful and I'm going to make lots of money on book sales and then I'll just write more. And then, you know, yeah, I know it's going to be more up and down like that, just like a round of golf is, just more up and down, you know?
Yeah, like you're releasing a book, I'm doing this podcast, and it's funny, when I thought about doing this podcast, I said I was going to commit to doing X amount of episodes, and I said there's a chance that nobody watches this. There's a realistic chance that I could do 20 episodes and I'm going to have 13 downloads. And if that happens, I've learned that people have no interest in listening to me on a podcast, right? Yeah. There's a chance your book has 12 sales.
Yeah.
And you still went through the process. And I'm assuming as you've gone through writing the book, you've probably learned so much about yourself. And you've had a chance to look back on the good and the bad, but whatever we do, we're always moving forward, no matter what happens, right? We just have to continue to move forward.
Yeah.
What you said about the expectations, and this happens a lot. Like, I'm assuming you get the player that they've showed up at the golf course and they've tell you today's the day that they want to break 80. And it's the day that they say they haven't touched their club in 2 weeks. They flew in last night. They got in at 11 p.m., right? They slept in a bed they don't like, and it's blown 30 miles an hour. And it's like, Mr. Jones, your expectations are so unrealistic relative to how you've set yourself up. It's not going to work. It's when the player shows up to a tournament and has the expectation that they're going to have their career day.
Yeah.
But, oh, well, work has got me busy and I haven't had time to practice as much as I've wanted to. And I deal with competitive players, but also I deal with recreational players. And I think the thing that I try to hammer home a lot is that your work ethic has to match your expectations, and your expectations can fluctuate as a result. If you've been busy with work, if you've had things going on, the expectation, again, you can still set goals, but they have to be realistic relative to the time that we've put in. And especially, I've got competitive players that have very lofty goals, and the reminder to them as I continue to push them, we have to continue to work our butts off. if we want to get to that.
Yeah, right. I agree completely.
One thing I really like in your book, and it made me laugh because I literally fell victim to this last Sunday playing in my regular game. You said, I just nod and smile when a player says, I didn't come all this way to lay up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
that I had to throw that in. I mean, we caddies hear that, so many times. And I have to always remember, I do this every day. The player who flew in, this is the one time they're doing it. So you're
yeah.
really, you're making light of it. You're not like judging them or mad at them or whatever. But yeah, you hear that a lot. And we happen to know what the success rate percentage over the course of a year is on that. And there's a hole on our course, the fifth hole, and it happens to be one where on the second shot, usually you have to hit over some bunkers, but then you're hitting directly into a pond if you do, and it's a hard shot. And it's made 10 times harder if there's a wind coming out of the west, as we've had a lot of the last week. And we were joking the other day in the caddy shack, we were like, well, we might as well just go put the players' balls in the bunker. Because, even if they're really good, the ball just wants to go there. The wind's blowing 30 miles an hour, left to right. The ball's going to go right. And so you kind of just laugh because that's a shot where people often use that phrase because it's a long second shot. It's a par 5 hole. And so, yeah. And so there's things that you hear over and over again, and you see people are people, and there's common traits that run through all of us. And
Yeah.
on your bad days, they can get to you, but most times you just nod and smile.
Yeah, I think I'm really wondering if you had a ticker for how many cold topped fairway woods you've seen this year.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yeah. You'll whisper to the player, like the other player you have sometimes when you're waiting for the green to clear, and the guy's got his 3-wood out, and you just say, "There's 100% chance he's going to top this ball right here," and you hope he doesn't, but and it's probably not 100%, but everybody's
We
been
just
there,
know.
everybody's seen it, Then the players know it too. The players know it too, and so it's kind of fun to kind of see the things that do happen over and over again. One of the things I really appreciate about caddying and the caddy shack and the camaraderie amongst the guys is you really have just this understanding of things and stories and experiences that is so common that you feel like you're not alone. When I was a pastor, I felt like I was always alone, and that was bad thinking because the guy down the street was going through the same exact stuff that I was going through. But it was a profession where you weren't allowed to show your vulnerabilities as much. So guys didn't talk about it because they were supposed to look strong and like they had it all together. And where you were pressured to look successful. Yeah. And in the caddy shack, it's just different. Like we've all had the same player who, didn't want to unload their bag, or we have had the same player who, stares at the caddy after every missed putt. And so knowing that other people have gone through that stuff, and when they're really good at what they do, it makes you feel a whole lot better. It puts you at ease.
That is very well said. And I guess, yeah, in your previous world, maybe your vulnerabilities weren't always on full display, but boy, does it feel like when you're on the golf course, especially when you're not having a good day, you are like one swing away from just being exposed, whether it be a bad shot or in front of someone. Like it's and the real skill there is, and I think we've kind of referenced it back and forth. We've hit a bad shot. What we do next, I think, says so much more about who we are as people on the journey that we're on. That matters a heck of a lot more than the amount of quality shots that we hit. It's what we do after we hit a bad shot.
Right. And I'll say, like, one of the things I love about golf is we all suck at it at some point.
Literally,
we really do. And I remember hearing a caddy tell a story once, and it was when I was new, and I didn't understand it as well as I do now, but their attempt to put a player at ease was, and I don't even know if this was completely true, but the way they describe it, they say, hey, listen, you suck, they suck, we all suck, like just hit the ball. And the point being is like get over the fear of looking
Yep.
silly. Get
Yep.
over the fear of shanking. It's going to happen to everyone. And that's something that is where golf is the great equalizer.
Oh,
Golf is
you're absolutely.
absolutely the great equalizer because there's no one who escapes it. I've worked with people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think I've even worked with a couple that are worth billions. And so you're dealing with people who aren't used to a lot of worldly failures, and yet golf was it was the thing they're not good at, or the
Right.
thing that they failed at a lot, and they probably do, in their other arenas as well, but they're much more in control there, and they can mask them, or they have people that are under their you know care that they have to go and fix things. But on the golf course, it's them and the ball, and there's no hiding from it, and there's no one to fix it, and they've got to deal with the outcomes. And you have kind of two drastically different responses. Generally, you do have the guys who have learned that it's hard, and they're not going to ever be as good as they want, and they take it in stride, and they're really down to earth, and that's probably the majority. And then you have the ones who are just so intense and so angry, and it kind of ruins their day.
Yeah, I think the sooner that people realize that anyone who plays golf is going to have a ton of period of struggle, but also a ton of period of success, especially as they continue to get better and better. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate that when we see tour players struggle, that it gets magnified on social media and everybody hears about it. And especially on the PGA Tour, there was one player this year that had some struggles, and they were heavily criticized for that. And I think in the span of 2 weeks, they shot 2 competitive rounds in the 80s. On the LPGA this year, there was a former number 1 player in the world who's won multiple majors who shot 81 in a competitive event, which is like the equivalent of us shooting like 120 to them. When those things happen, I don't like to highlight them, but sometimes I'll send them to players. I'll tell that to players just to remind them these players are the 1% of the 1% of the 1%,
Yeah.
and they will have bad days and they will struggle. And that's totally okay. Then we also see the next week they come back and they shoot 63
Yeah. Yeah.
because they have a bad day and they just say, like, it is what it is. Today's
Yeah.
over. Let's get back at it tomorrow.
Right.
You mentioned the turn window at Whistler, or at the club that you're at, and to me, the quality of a snack bar goes a long way at a club. You cannot give me a hodgepodge snack bar at the turn. I need quality.
Yeah.
The club that you're at, are we talking we've got a high level snack bar at this place? What grade are you giving the snack bar?
Yeah. No, they really raised their game this year. Uh, yeah, I was really impressed. So we have actually one of the things that players get is complimentary hot dogs and brats.
Okay.
Uh, and I say complimentary; they're not free. I always remind players they paid for it somehow. But
Yeah.
it's a cool thing. It's funny. It's funny. You'll see people who are worth millions of dollars and just paid all that money for a trip, thousands of dollars for a multi-day golf trip, and you tell them they've got a free hot dog, and that just completely, raises their mood. But we got some new sandwiches this year: corned beef, peanut butter, and banana. This turkey pesto, real game changers. But the number one game changer this year was we had these bags of jerky,
Okay.
and those became real popular amongst the caddies. So I feel like we're doing really well. Yeah, I appreciate it. So on the days where players don't offer anything, you get kind of a free hot dog or brat as well. But when you have players who are able or willing to get something else, those days with jerky were a real treat.
No doubt. So I guess, did you just basically say that your second book's gonna be called The Value of a Free Hot Dog? Is that
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. No, I mean that's another thing where it's like you just get. I mean, there's got to be something more profound about the psyche of people, and how to work with people. There's a story in there somewhere that to unpack because it's fascinating to me. One, to see how people like that get excited about a free hot dog or brat, and then two, to see how they search for a golf ball that's lost. It's like they're going to be standing in a North Korean soup line if they don't find that thing. And um, it's I had a guy. I did not tell this story in the book. Probably should have. It fascinated me. We were on a hole where there's a creek to cross on a par 5, and he hit it into the creek, and we go and look for it. I'm pointing at his ball in the creek. He hits a new shot. He drops the ball and hits the shot. And so I start going to the other guy. I was 4 caddying that day for 4 people, so you got to move. And all of a sudden I hear this splash. And so the guy just couldn't leave the ball, and he falls into the water. And so then we're early enough in the round where he didn't want to be in soaked pants. So he calls the pro shop and gets them to bring out a new pair of pants for him. And I think it was $265. I know it was over $200, but for some reason, $265 is the number that jumps out. So he ended up spending $265 on pants instead of just leaving his golf ball behind.
That's incredible. My dad might kill me for telling this story. I'm a golf professional. For lack of a better term, my dad has unlimited free brand new golf balls as long as he lives, right? But every time he hits ball in the woods or anything like that, he's always searching for it. Well, sure enough, one time I get a message from my mom that my dad catches poison ivy by searching for these balls. And my dad doesn't play brand new Pro V1s, right? So he's searching for like $1 golf balls in these bushes, right? And I'll just never forget the first time that I'd seen him afterwards. I'm like, Dad, you have got to be kidding me, right? Like you're so obsessed with finding these golf balls. You will never need another golf ball as long as you live. And he's in there and he caught poison ivy, and that just always made me laugh.
Yeah, right. It's a funny thing to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. You reference I can't remember if you referenced in your book, maybe just saw it on Twitter. You were able to attend the 2021 Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
You're an American. I'm a Canadian. So I guess I'm Switzerland here on the Ryder Cup land.
Right.
When Tiger played, I was as pro US as they come. Now that Tiger's not playing, I just hope it's a competitive match. 2021 Ryder Cup was a US victory. There were some really cool moments. There were some guys that played absolutely fantastic on the American side. Can you give me like your opinion? I know what the golf was, and I've never been able to experience a Ryder Cup in person. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of being at that Ryder Cup? Were you on the first tee? Different things like that.
It was kind of cool. Like you're out in this rural part of Wisconsin, and all of a sudden this world-class event comes. And it was, there was such a buildup for it because also it had been a year longer because of COVID delaying it the year before. And then also you see the construction every day. And so there's such buildup. Went to the practice rounds, and it was fun. But then the first morning I was part of a group, we met at a caddy's house at 2:30 in the morning, we're in line by 4, and we had to sprint, and it was, I don't know what it was over half a mile, maybe closer to a mile from where you could enter to where the first tee bleachers were. So we're trying to get in there, and I'm not the swiftest fella, a little larger. And but I'm running, but you're up and down. It was downright dangerous. Like I actually am like, I've reflected many a time since then, like what insurance company like allows this to go on? Because I straight up took somebody down to save myself. I mean, I was about to fall down a hill, and I've thought about this person like a number of times since then, because I just grabbed onto their shoulder and took them down, because otherwise I was going down, and it was just my instinct.
Right.
And you saw people slipping. I've caddied for orthopedic surgeons since then who tell me that their business gets good after events, because people fall over. But anyway, it was really fun in the first tee. I will admit, I didn't love being in presence there because there's so few groups. I think a Ryder Cup's probably the worst event to go to for live golf because, there's so few groups and there's so many people that, it kind of, I went to the first day and then I didn't need to go anymore. The most fun I had was because the course has become such a big part of my life, but my family doesn't go there because, they'd have to pay to golf and stuff.
Right.
sitting in the living room and sharing the course with them, and my kids not fully understanding how special a place it is, and then getting texts from friends in Michigan who knew that I was doing this that aren't golfers, and like, whoa, I didn't know you worked somewhere like this. And
Right.
that was actually probably the biggest thrill of the whole thing for me. And
Yeah.
then, when you're watching them up close, it is just really interesting and fascinating to see how they hit the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just so darn good. And and yet there, I still very much remember watching Brooks Koepka on a practice hole miss like 8 putts in a row from a short distance, and I was just kicking myself for not having that video, because I want to be able to pull it out to any player who gets upset that they miss a short putt, and he just kept going over and over and over and over again, and it happens. And so it was a good experience, but this year, with it being in Italy, I have to admit I'm not so much of a Ryder Cup fan that I felt the need to get up at 2:30 in the morning for the matches.
Well, let's call a spade a spade. I'll let you off the hook for not being a Ryder Cup fan because you don't know this yet, but you and I are very well connected in one small category, and it's Saturday afternoons in the fall.
Yeah.
Because you might not be the biggest Ryder Cup fan, but I know that you are a Michigan Wolverine fan,
Yes.
and I am also a Michigan Wolverine fan. So
Yes.
maybe
Very
as
good.
we kind of veer towards the end of this interview, I need to get this on the record right now. Is Michigan going to beat Ohio State this year? Yes or no, in your opinion?
I will say this: I think Michigan has won the last 2 years where I am not convinced they had more talent or were better than Ohio State.
Sure.
This year, I think they are actually better than Ohio State. And the person who tries to guard my heart from deep disappointment says, well, we have to be prepared that Ohio State's going to be the hungry team this year that, gets the breaks. I think we are better. I think we are a better team. And so I'm going to say, yes, we are going to win, but I am cautious that, I grew up, in the 80s and 90s, and in the 90s, we always had 4 losses and would beat a top
Yeah.
ranked Ohio State team. So, history has shown. And now I've raised 4 kids, 2 of them who are now in college. So, went through up until 2 years ago, Michigan losing every year to Ohio State, to the point where they come and ask me, like, Dad, why do you love them so much? Are they ever
Yeah.
good? uh, and uh, and I'm like, I want them to be able to go back to time. Actually, I remember being in your neck of the woods in Windsor at some bar when I was home for Thanksgiving break, the day before Shaminga Biaka Batuka ran for over 300 yards against Ohio State, and I had been in college, undergrad in
What a
Chicago,
throwback.
and so I wasn't as close to it all. And I remember the guy the DJ or whatever, kept talking about how Michigan was going to win the next day, and I was like, "Oh, I'm home! I'm home! I feel good to be home." And because I hadn't heard all about Michigan all year, and then that was the next day that Biaka Batuka went nuts. So those are good memories.
Yeah, for the longest time, my dad's a Michigan fan as well, but he always said you can't call it a rivalry because they just keep getting smoked, right? So it's been nice to see that happen. Unfortunately, someone that I work with went to the University of Georgia and is a Georgia fan. So not even in my group of like coworkers and friends do I feel like I'm big man on campus being a Michigan fan, because I've got to
Yeah,
listen to this bum
yeah,
talk about the
yeah.
Georgia Bulldogs all the time.
Yeah, and I caddied the other day for 2 guys who went to TCU, and even they
Oh,
acknowledged that Michigan's better than TCU, and just everything that could have gone wrong for us went wrong, and everything that could have went right for them went right in the playoffs. And so, there's always that element of, you're still, as
for sure.
big business as this has become, you're still dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, so you just aren't completely sure what you're going to get on any given Saturday. But
Well,
they look
yeah.
good, and there also doesn't look to be too, like, a team that's so head and shoulders above this year. So I'm hoping this is the year.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, especially for those It's like everyone who's critical of a professional athlete because they have an off day. If that person who's critical is a golfer, right?
Yeah.
Any given Saturday, those players can have the best game of their career, the worst game of their career. Similar to us on the golf course on a Saturday.
Isn't
morning.
it nice we're not under that microscope? It's got to
Oh
be.
man. Yeah. Have you been to? I'm assuming you've been to the big house.
Oh, countless times.
Yeah. Imagine being on that field. All right, Mark, this has been fantastic. I want to finish just with a few rapid fire questions.
Sure thing.
Before you caddy, what is the number one what is your one warm up that you must do before you head out on a loop?
Put Vaseline on my nether regions.
I did not expect that answer.
Yeah. No, absolute must for the bigger caddies.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. What is your favorite on-course drink?
G2, purple Gatorade.
Okay. Purple G2, not the original purple. Purple G2.
No, need the G2. You drink so many over the course of the season, you got to cut down on the sugar a little.
Okay, fair enough. After a long day on the golf course caddying, if you could have one meal, what would that meal be?
Jimmy John's number 9 with hot peppers.
There we go. So you've had the ability to work at an absolutely beautiful golf course. Have you had a chance to play really? What's the best golf course you've ever played? Or is it where you work?
Yeah, it's where I work.
Okay,
but I always say to people though, Michigan doesn't have the courses in the top 10 necessarily like Wisconsin is starting to get, but Northern Michigan's no slouch, and I have a lot of good memories of trips to Boyne and other places up there that are real special to me.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to play Treetops. I've been fortunate to play Forest Dunes, and those are just two beautiful spots that luckily for us in Southwestern Ontario are not that far. So tell us about your book. When has your book come out? What's it called? Where can we get it?
Yep. So Caddy Tales, and it is available for pre-order on Amazon beginning. Actually, I'm going to put up a tweet later on today. So I'm just waiting for the publisher. They put up the ebook, but they're getting the hard copy book up there today, and it'll be available for pre-order, and then it actually will be downloaded or shipped out next week. So if people could just search and go to Amazon and search Caddy Tales, that would be great. And if people want to follow me on Twitter, they can find me at Caddy Tales or just Mark the Caddy. And there will be countless updates that are being thrown up there. But I would really appreciate people's support because I want to tell the story, but I also am very open about the fact that I am hoping that this will open up some doors. I have some I want to continue caddying and being in the golf industry, but I also have some skills in writing and speaking and stuff that now that I've kind of gotten through some hard times in life, I want to be able to use those a little more. So hopefully this is step 1 in the process.
That's fantastic. And reading through a little bit of the book, I didn't get all the way through it. I think you did a fantastic job explaining this is not just me telling pointless story after pointless story. There's a flow to your book, and I think covers some fantastic, obviously, things you've experienced on the golf course, but some fantastic life lessons. I'm looking forward to getting a hard copy. And I think actually kind of going into the holiday season, there actually, I don't know if my dad listens to this podcast. I hope not, because there's a realistic chance that this book might end up in his stocking on Christmas Day.
That'd be great.
All right, Mark. Well, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. And everyone, make sure you follow Mark on Twitter. Actually, a really good follow, and get his book. And that's it. I hope everyone has a great day, Mark. Enjoy the rest of your season. Happy off season that's coming soon, and take care.
Yep. Thank you so much.